Hello and welcome to Shades and Justice podcast. This is Dr. Evelyn Hill, and we are very excited to have a brand new guest here on today. We have Miss Laura Downey, and she works with environmental justice for kids. I thought this was such a phenomenal topic that I had to have her on our show.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. It's really nice to be here with you.
Well, I can't wait. So let's start with some basic questions about you. Where do you work, and how did you get involved with environmental justice for kids?
Well, so the first thing I want to say is that we're getting involved in teaching kids about environmental justice, but we've been involved in teaching kids about the environment for many years. And our organization is the Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education. And we're a statewide nonprofit organization. And our work centers around making sure that kids, both in and out of school, are learning about the places that they live.
Wow. Well, when I met you, we were in Topeka and there was some kind of kid splash water event. Would you like to share? I know I wanted to get better something, but I couldn't since I was an adult. But could you share what fun stuff you all were doing with the kids?
Yes, I would love to. So that is, you were at our Topeka Water Festival, and we invite fourth graders from all around the Topeka area to come in and to learn all about different aspects of water in their lives. And so they do a ton of hands-on activities. We have a lot of volunteers and sponsors who help us put on the event, and they teach the kids about everything from where does the water come from when it comes into your house? How much water do you use, and how can you be better at conserving that water? What kinds of impacts you have on water and water quality? What kinds of things animals and plants rely on for water, and how that plays into that whole system, how we used water historically compared to how we use it today. They learn about all sorts of stuff. Properties of water, you name it, everything there is to know about water, and it's all aligned with what they need to know in their science standards. So it's a really fun day for the kids, and it's a really important day for the teachers because it gives them a good opportunity to get out and learn about the water around them in their community.
Well, that is super exciting. Now, how did you take interest in kids learning about environmental subject matters such as water?
Well, I think it really stems back to my own childhood and being outside a lot as a kid. I don't know, were you outside a lot as a kid?
All the time. I didn't want to be in the house.
Yeah, same. And we would play in things, everything from watching water after it rained go down the storm drain, and we would have twig races in the water to see whose twig got to the storm drain the quickest, to poking around in little puddles of water and ponds and seeing what creatures were in there and turning over leaves. It was a part of my childhood that I recognize now as an adult was really the beginnings of thinking about things in a scientific way, because it was all about making observations and noticing what was changing and what was different in the different seasons and the different places. And that really tapped into my love of learning and learning science in particular. And so I started teaching. I was teaching in Chicago, and I think the thing that really cemented it for me, I taught in a neighborhood. It was a very poor neighborhood, and the school that I taught in was a fabulous school, but the playground that the kids had was a big slab of cement, and the only trees that were anywhere close to them were kind of in the front of the schoolyard, but they were enclosed by a fence. And right across the street I could see over the top of this wall all of these trees, and it was a cemetery across the street. And my principal, who was amazing, I asked her one day, I said, if I could get permission to take the kids over to the cemetery, would you let me do that? She said, well, I guess I would. Why would you want to do that? And I'm like, I peeked in there and it's absolutely beautiful. There's trees and there's little hills in there and there's a pond in there. And I want to take the kids over there. And when I did take the kids over there, it was such an amazing difference in how they were as learners. They were curious about everything. We couldn't walk 2 feet that they weren't wanting to explore what was there and see what was going on. And I just found it to be a really powerful way for kids to learn. So that's kind of what I think connected me in to doing environmental education, environmental learning, outdoor learning.
That's amazing. I remember as a little girl, my dad was good with gardens, and that's when I learned a little bit about gardening. I never took a whole lot of interest in it, but I did find myself very curious. I wanted to see what was fertilizer. I wanted to see the seeds. I wanted to plant the seeds, and it just took too long for the harvest time to come up.
Yeah, kids can be impatient about stuff like that.
Yes.
But boy, when they do wait and they get that thing that they grew,
my gosh, that sucked me in. So I have absolutely loved that part of learning. And like you said, once you get out there in the dirt and start asking questions and finding out what's going on out there in the environment, it really does make a difference. It really does. I remember when my grandchildren were really little, I was trying to get them to eat green things. And so I bought a book that had apples and green grapes and broccoli and cabbage. And of course, they weren't that impressed, but I was really impressed with the book. And I just think it's so important that kids get to know and be familiar with the environment, the outside environment. One of the things you said to me was something to the effect where you said certain areas in the city, it was planned a certain way to not have quality, to have a quality environment. Would you mind expanding a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. I will preface this with I'm still learning. But what it was easy to see in that school that I taught in Chicago, for example, like right away, in that neighborhood, there wasn't green spaces. And green spaces can contribute to not just it's a nice place to be, but it contributes to air quality. It contributes to lowering stress. There's studies that say that green spaces can help with violence in neighborhoods. And there weren't green spaces in this neighborhood that were accessible to the kids in that neighborhood. And that is just like a beginning example of the kinds of things that Black and brown people, people who are lower income, live in communities that tend to be environmentally degraded and by design. And so it's where factories are located. It's where highways and freeways are located. It's where dump sites are located and municipal waste sites. And it's where water quality is oftentimes impaired. It's where there's a classification that EPA uses called brownfields, and those are places that have had such environmental issues with them that they're considered unusable spaces. And if you look at where those brownfields are and you overlay it with a map of where people of color are or people who are of lower income are, you'll see that there's like a really strong connection to where those places are. And that's what we talk about when we talk about environmental justice. That's what we're talking about, is that people of color, lower income communities are much more likely to experience environmental hazards in their neighborhoods than others. And that's by design. And the thing that struck me when I was learning about this, and I continue to learn about it, is when you overlay that with a map of where the greatest health issues are, those maps line up.
Mhm.
And you started talking about then the process of redlining. And so you've got environmental degradations, you've got health issues, and then that process of redlining keeps people from having a voice and a
Mhm.
say in what's happening in their communities. And
Mhm.
so it's I think you and I connected on a systems level, that we understand that there's a whole bunch of systems that are in place, and many of them by design, that were
Mhm.
designed to not really create an environment that is conducive to human health and well-being.
Mhm. Well, I was in awe when you began, as you mentioned that it was by design, and it wasn't me because I try to be real careful.
I
But
understand.
you mentioned it, and I'm going, yes, you're absolutely correct. So I was just excited for the conversation. And those listening to our podcast, often I've heard different people say, I've worked all my life. There is no white privilege. I work just like everybody else. Well, sometimes it may appear to be true, but I also think the other side of that is um, because of the color of your skin, you may have been offered jobs, and maybe people of color were not offered. Uh,
Hmm.
and they intentionally and purposefully were not allowed to work in certain positions at particular or certain organizations. Same being in living quarters.
Hmm.
People of color may not have been permitted to live in certain areas of the city, and were intentionally encouraged to stay in a area that they could afford, which
Right.
is usually in those brownfield areas that you mentioned earlier, or the redlining areas that you mentioned earlier. And so it is something that I feel like we need to expose and explore a little bit more. And when you told me about the kids learning about their environment, man, that was awesome. And so this is the type of information that we don't have in our public schools today, to my knowledge. But I was so impressed that there is an organization out there, the Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education. Wow, there is an opportunity for kids to learn. Tell me more about your organization.
I would love to. So we're a small organization. We function on a statewide level, and the way that we impact kids is, and this aligns with what I believe too. To me, knowledge is power, and education is power. And the best and the most effective way to get to kids is through those educators who work with kids. And so
Mhm.
we do a lot of professional development for teachers and other educators. And one of the things that across all different environmental topics, so we provide them with really good tools, resources, and strategies for teaching about water, about
Mhm.
air, about wildlife, about waste, about energy, about the land, and what I'm really excited about is we're working on some professional learning to teach kids about environmental justice, so that they can understand, first of all, what's going on in their communities, and where are the environmental challenges, and how does that connect to them and their families, and how does it connect to their health, and what can they do that can improve those situations and circumstances, but also understanding historically the systems that put those things in that place.
Mhm.
And with armed with that knowledge and that information and that power, um, we look to kids. We kind of messed up our environment as adults, and so we're looking to the kids to be the problem solvers. They're the ones who are going to inherit this, and so we want them armed with the tools that they need to be the best problem solvers as they can.
Absolutely. So, what are your plans? Are there any plans for expansions of your program? I I sense, since you are a statewide organization, that you've got more territory that you'd like to cover in the state. Tell me kind of what are the plans possibly, and how can we, the public, help you do that?
So again, if we tried to work directly with kids all the time, like we do at the Topeka Water Festival, we wouldn't reach very many kids. We reach a lot of kids with that program. It's about 1,000 kids on a usual year. You saw kind of a scaled back year because of COVID, but we work with teachers, and what parents and community members and teachers and friends of teachers can do is really work with us to get that professional learning in place, and work with us so that we can support them to do all sorts of things, from creating outdoor classrooms, which are much safer and healthier places for kids to be right now, especially with challenges with COVID, and also really highly effective places for kids to learn. It supports being outdoors. This sounds counterintuitive, but the research is pretty clear that kids with attention deficit hyperactive disorders do so much better when they're learning outdoors. They're able to focus better. And so it's just a good strategy for every kid to be learning outdoors. And there's so much, as you said, that you poking around in a garden, or digging around in the dirt, or looking at what's going on over here with these insects. We can help them put in everything from food gardens to pollinator gardens to just learning how to collect data around their school. Like, how much energy are you using? We had a teacher that we got to work with at Wyandotte High School who started doing these investigations with the kids in the school around energy. First is where he started. And those kids dug in to what was happening with the energy use at their school. And of course, energy use is connected to climate and climate change, because all the energy that we use is currently is putting off greenhouse gas, which is contributing to it. So if you save energy, you're helping with that challenge. But what the kids found out is that when you save energy, you also save money. And those kids saved the school a ton of money, like a ton of money. And in the process, learned how to carry over those learnings into their home so that they could save money on energy at their house as well. And then that gets the kids all juiced up and excited about doing things. They wound up creating a garden in their courtyard in the inside of their, inside of their school. And then they started getting into hydroponics and aquaponics. So they were growing fruits and vegetables in water, and then using that using fish in a fish tank in a circulated system to provide the fertilizer to the plant. They were learning all sorts of amazing things. So helping us to connect with those teachers who are passionate about teaching the kids and teaching them in new ways, and getting the professional learning in place for them to be effective and have the tools and resources to do it is what the community members can completely support.
Yeah. And there are organizations like ours, Avenue of Life, and others, nonprofits in our community that work directly with the school district one way or another, with parents or with the kids, that we may be able to help make more connections with you and teachers and the director of student services, that type of thing. So we definitely can help with that. I think they would be very interested in that. I know the Kansas City, Kansas School District has a new superintendent. I think she started in, I want to say, June. So I know she's getting her feet wet with lots of new information and trying to steer the ship. But this might be a really good time to offer some of these opportunities for the kids. And you mentioned Wyandotte High School here in KCK. Were there other high schools that you all worked in?
In the Kansas City area, not as many. We've worked with a lot of teachers who work in the Kansas City area. So a couple of teachers at two of the middle schools, and I've worked a lot with a colleague in Kansas City who I think also, with Richard Mabian, and we've been exploring
Yes.
all sorts of options. Richard has done some amazing on the ground work with schools around water.
Yes.
So it's all part of a connected system, and we work with great partners on the ground because we can't be everywhere at every moment. Then we can get some amazing things done. But he was working with kids who were going out and doing stream monitoring. And what I mean by that is they were going out and testing the water in the streams to see what was in it. And then looking at how healthy their water was, which is important.
Yes.
Because if you have fish and you eat fish out of a stream or a river, and it's not a very healthy, it's a polluted river, then everything that fish takes in, when you eat it, you're taking it in too. So it connects them to that piece of it. He also was really, the timing was around when the Flint water crisis happened, which is, again, another environmental justice issue, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so knowing what's in your water and knowing where your water comes from becomes knowledge that becomes power. And so, we would like to do more in Kansas City, Kansas.
Well, that's awesome. We're going to continue to have these conversations, and hopefully we can be beneficial in helping you get more involved with the kids here in Kansas City. They're going to have a blast learning, especially this Make a Splash with Project Wet. I absolutely love this. That's why I said I wanted to splash some. And then the handouts were just awesome. The little clouds had all kinds of wonderful information in it. Man, I just was so impressed. And the kids seem like they just ate it up.
The kids have a blast. It's so much fun. And it's, I have a good friend of mine who used to say learning should be joyous and rigorous. And if it's not those two things simultaneously, then we need to fix it. And so I love it when kids are laughing and squealing and having a good time and getting wet. It's a part of the water festival. I would love to do a water festival in Kansas City, Kansas. It's a way that it's sort of an entryway for us with teachers so that they can see firsthand how powerful and engaging this kind of learning can be. And then we can work with those teachers to do more in their classrooms. We
certainly thank you for being a part of Shades and Justice podcast. Again, Ms. Laura Downey for environmental justice for our kids from the Kansas Association of Conservation and Environmental Education. Thank you again. What a wonderful interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. It was my pleasure.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you.
You too.